I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Tom, we have reviewed a lot of indie music.
Yeah.
We've done some like more abstract stuff, but we haven't done any electronic-based music in a while, strictly electronic-based. So today, how about we review the new album from Ben Frost, Aurora?
Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. If you guys don't know who Ben Frost is, I didn't before reviewing this album. He is an Australian electronic experimental music maker, artist, I would say, based in Reykjavik. I think I'm saying that right.
Reykjavik,
in Reykjavik, Iceland. So he looks just like Charles Manson, and that's, I think, a really good. I think just looking at his picture really sets a really good stage for what you're about to hear as you embark on the journey that Aurora takes you on. Tom, how would you describe? I mean, you hear the term electronic music, and what do you
think?
It
can mean a lot of different
things. You think like, oh, fluttery little melodies that just sound so pretty and sweet. What is Aurora?
It's really a very grating and sonically thick experience.
Yes.
I don't know how else to put it. I mean, it's, electronic music can come in a variety of forms. And what this is, I mean, I would say it even borders on industrial at times.
Absolutely.
It has very just that industrial kind of grating aesthetic to it.
I'd say ambience a little too. It incorporates
at times,
a lot. I get a lot of
does.
Tim Hecker and like what he has done, especially on like Rave Death 1972 with like ambient distortion.
Because you feel like he's taking a lot of really gritty, like even organic samples and just processing the hell out of them. That kind of like even granular synthesis at times that you get with those kinds of artists. But it's definitely not like dance music.
No,
it's definitely
absolutely
not about thick beats and synth melodies or anything like that. So you mentioned Tim Hecker, and I would say that's a pretty fair comparison in general. But Ben Frost definitely takes it in a different direction, where Tim Hecker focuses a little bit more on that kind of delicate mood. He is a very just upfront, in your face kind of artist.
Yeah, Ben Frost in Aurora seems to be more about creating. Well, first of all, there's a lot of melody in electronic melodies that come out in the mix, making this. That's what I think defines the classification between calling this electronic music versus ambient music.
Yeah,
because quite honestly, they're very similar. I mean, you don't have any vocals here. That's something that we should note. So it's the entirety of this album is based on dynamic contrast throughout these different layers and song progressions that Ben Frost is creating. And I think that that's the most important thing when listening to music and analyzing music, for that matter, that does not have vocals, that does not have that human connection to it, and especially when you're using like synthetic elements like MIDI keyboards and other computerized melodies, I think that it's really important for artists to create a sense of dynamic contrast.
Oh yeah.
And I would say that Ben Frost, man, he must just really understand this principle at a very fine level, because I mean, you listen, like this album starts really, the first song on the album is called Flex. And it's just this like textured opener. And then it moves into Nolan, track 2. And before you know it, Nolan is just beating your face into the ground with just cataclysmic, like drum hits and like waves of distortion, and then there's this just brilliant, synth melody that comes out, and it's just a very intense experience.
Yeah. Now, one thing I really liked about this album, you mentioned going from Flex into Nolan, that Ben Frost does here is he has a very wide variety of even just song lengths.
Absolutely.
I mean, the album's only 9 tracks, but you have varying song lengths from a minute and a half up to a couple that span kind of the 7-minute range. And I noticed that you and I picked the exact same 3 track picks: Nolan, Secant, and Vinter.
Which can sometimes be an indication of a poorly written album.
Yeah,
I don't think so
I don't think that's
case.
the case here. I think the reason for that is because those were clearly picked and designed to be the keystones of this album. They're the longer tracks, and man, are they warranted as being longer tracks.
Yeah,
it shows good album design.
It absolutely does, and quite honestly, this is a record that is designed to be a one straight-through listening experience. If you've watched Velocities in Music before, you know that Tom and I really cater to albums that do that, or at least designed to do that. You really don't even need tracks on this album. Just put it on as in, 40 minute, listening experience, and the way that that high intensity songs offset with like the lower, more ambient songs, it just adds a fluidity to the album.
It totally does. And the tracks that we didn't pick them because they were bad tracks. That's not the case. It's because they just didn't happen to be the standouts, but they're kind of the glue that keeps all the pieces moving. It keeps the album together. They still play a very key role, and I think that's important when listening to an album like this, because in the history of our show, we haven't reviewed a whole lot of electronic music, and I know that sometimes we tend to be a little bit harsher on it than a lot of modern music listeners. I think it's just because we're looking for something very specific in electronic music.
It absolutely is. I mean, and it extends, to any music that doesn't follow traditional pop format where you have vocals, drums, guitar, maybe some other elements in there. And I think that, for us, it's also a little bit more challenging because we grade on, like when we're interpreting an album, we're looking for big ideas and concepts and things that make the whole album experience together, but it doesn't necessarily need vocals to do that. And I think Ben Frost is actually taking a big step on proving our point for us.
I totally agree. And most of the time, I think my gripe with some of the electronic music that's coming out is that they focus too much on production and not enough on songwriting or composition. And production is great. It's an important thing to have, but if all you are is a good producer and you can't write a song or compose an arrangement in this sound space, then you're not really going to accomplish much. It's just kind of like candy at that point. Like, it sounds good, but there's not really any depth or any real meat to it. I feel like from the opposite end, though, I will say, I think indie rock a lot of times has kind of the opposite challenge. People focus on melody, people focus on songwriting, but they don't know how to produce or present it. And so, there are artists on both sides who are able to get the best of both worlds, and that's what I'm looking for.
Right, and the more that we review music, the more I realize that the production, whether it's the actual effects chosen and how, it's produced to sound, versus including and also kind of a derivative of the mixing as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like a fine glove that has to fit the song or the songwriting. And if you choose it correctly, I think it works really well. If you choose it incorrectly, it's horrible. We've all worn that small glove. Like, we've all been, if the glove don't fit, then it's terrible music. That's really the saying that we have. Tom, what are you feeling for Aurora?
I am going to give it an 83. I think it's very good.
I completely agree with your score. You did a great job scoring this.
Thank you.
I'm going to give it an 83.
I appreciate it. You liked my score so much that you just decided to copy me.
That's absolutely what I did. That's absolutely what I did. What did you guys think of Aurora? Have you listened to Ben Frost's previous records? If so, would you recommend some to us? This is our first exposure to Ben Frost, and since it was a very enjoyable experience, we'd love to hear more, so your recommendations are much appreciated. Leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what records you'd like to see Tom and I review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.